I see a black man and one man, I think of strength, black empowerment we have within, building community development. Let's continue to build our own. Let's continue to stay strong. Motivation, no matter the hate, no stopping. You just go. Listen up to Quan, John, and Queen P for giving us a voice. Speak up for what's yours and yell and make that noise. We are kings and we are queens. Melanated royalty, just getting started. Loving self, self and knowledge. Stack that wealth. Motivational motors, y'all.
As myself, as an editor, I have not yet edited a piece of work from somebody that has the passion in Black history and Black culture. And I've been waiting for that like manuscript to fall in my lap, and it just hasn't happened yet. But like, I'm talking about like to talk about the past, because I'm a huge history buff. So I love what you're saying, and I realize that really that's what makes music and literature move. That's what moves me as a consumer, as somebody who consumes music and consumes literature. It is that reach out to the past that makes us move. And that's probably why I dislike today's music, because I feel like our rappers today aren't doing that. And those who are the people I listen to. Like, okay, sure, K-Dot hasn't released an album since I think was the last one he did.
Yeah.
So I'm like, where you at? Because he had that. Like in every other song, he's referring to some part of history or some part of his past. Cole's doing that too. Always. He's always talking about the people that come before him. So it's like, you look at the mainstream idiots who are spitting over a hot beat, and they're not doing that. They're talking about nonsense. And sure, people can relate to it because they might be talking about feelings and all that stuff. But to me, somebody like me who's looking to be moved by music, it's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, y'all ain't rapping about nothing. There's no passion behind it. There's no call out to the people that came before you. You don't pay homage to anybody. You just get on a hot beat because so-and-so made it and it sounds dope. Yep. You just want to put it out. And it's very frustrating. Yep. And I'm sure you could tell how pissed I am about the whole idea. So like, that's how I feel. Like, it's just a bunch of nonsense and it irritates my soul. And I feel like our ancestors will be 10 times more irritated than I am right now.
I have a couple of theories on that as to why you see that recent change over the years. So here's my theory. When we talk about the golden era of hip hop, these artists were coming right after the civil rights movement. So like when you talk about Chuck D, for instance, he was fed by the Black Panther Party, part of the breakfast program. You know, Pac, his mother was a Black Panther, and you see so much influence, like even from Wu-Tang when they, I believe it's Clarence X with the 5 percenters and all of that. So that's right. What you had was an era before that was really well read, but they put poetry to music and stuff. But what happened is over the last, I want to say when you get to the George Bush Jr. era, when we start No Child Left Behind, what that did was change everything. We're no longer teaching kids and giving them content. What we're doing is teaching them to pass a test for school funding. So what happened is, and I would say this as an English high school, when I was in high school, we were writing 10, 15 page papers, no matter what.
That's right.
But what happened was when I taught high school, we reduced, I basically end up having 60 students in one class because the laws were you could have 30 students per one teacher. So what they would do is put me as an English professor in with a history professor and place 60 students in one class. So you imagine if you teach 2 classes of 60 students, that's 120 papers. With that being said, and we're not allowed to really have long projects because we're teaching them how to pass the test. So what we have is a bunch of students that are writing 1-page papers. And if they're writing only 1-page papers, they're only reading very little. And I would say all of this ties into hip hop now because this generation doesn't read. They don't read. And if you cannot read, you cannot speak to the ancestors. You cannot, you can't have that because you don't have the vocab. So what they are doing is really, in some sense, their voice has become just another instrument with the skirts and all the other like ad libs and that sort of thing. It's a lot of it they can't refer back because they haven't read. And so what we find is it's just like this. Hip hop has always been a reflection of also American culture. America is anti-intellectual. How many? Right. I mean, when we elect who we elect, and people are feeling like I don't read, and then check this out. They looked at Obama and said he's too professorial. It's a push in America to be anti-intellectual. So it's not surprising for me that the lyrics, as Sonia Sanchez always said, stimulate you from the stomach down. It's what you can consume, what you can have sex with, and what you can move your feet to. It's nothing about stimulating the neck up. So it doesn't surprise me, you know. So that's why I think it is what it is. And I've heard young people say, I can't rock with Kendrick or J. Cole because they make me think too much.
Right. They can't understand them.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sad.
They make me think too much because we have made our kids consumers, not producers. Right. We made them consumers.
Right. Dumb them out.
They don't want to produce. They like, you know, when I teach and I'm engaged and I do all of that. But a lot of times I feel like I have to sometimes put endless entertainment. Right. Because they're looking to be stimulated.
Right. Right.
They don't have that initiative or grit or self-drive. And I don't want to say that's for all the millennials, because it is some, and you know, and they get a bad rap, but it is enough. It is a critical mass of young people that are just fixated on stimulation. Right. And they just consume. So that's my theory of why the music is the way it is, you know.
Professor, I have a question. I'm gonna bring it back to what you said. I'm gonna have a question about the grading process in college and who you your sentiments towards how Black professors are treated, quote unquote, on these college campuses. My first question is, I'm actually an author. I'm an author of actually 4 manuscripts, 2 of which are published right now.
All right,
Motives, which can be found on Amazon and Audible in audio form, and Habitual Habitat in Urban Sermon. That's being actually orated right now, but it can be found in paperback on Amazon right now. Now check it out. And Miss Portia Mystique is my gracious editor of both manuscripts. And she will be, God willing, the editor here on out. All right. But my question about that is because I have a story in Motivational Motives, and since you're a professor of English, hint, hint, you can utilize these in your classes if need be.
Okay. All right.
They're a book of parables, first and foremost. So I have a story in Motivational Motives. It's called Academic Duress. It's a story of a college student that he had an interaction with a Black woman professor, and he felt like she was grading him irrationally and illogically. So let's just, to make a long story short, he was writing these phenomenal papers, right? And her only she mandated, that's the word, she mandated that you could not put your opinion in the paper. Okay, so keep that. You couldn't put an opinion. Everything had to be a direct reference from what your reading was. You couldn't say, well, I felt like Malcolm meant this. Oh, well, I felt like Martin meant that. You couldn't say that. You had to say, Malcolm said this, Martin said that. Okay. So, all right. So he was a very creative guy. So it was hard for him to really change his type of style, so to speak, his writing style. But he did this because this was the last class he needed. It actually was a sociology class. And it was, I think it was called the history of women, or women's point of view from a sociological, sense, right? So he was mad he had to take that class anyway, but it was the only class left. So he took the class, and first paper he wrote, he got an A-. Fine. He said, fine. All right. Second paper he wrote, he got an A-, professor. He's like, fine. Third paper he wrote, he got another A minus.
Mm.
Now he's starting to say, what's going on here? I'm writing these phenomenal papers. I'm utilizing her rule of thumb. I'm not putting my opinion. So he steps to her like, yo, what's going on here? And basically she just tells him, hey, try harder type thing. Long story short, the next 4 papers, what grade did he get, Professor? An A minus. Right? So at this point, he's pissed, but he's ready to graduate. He doesn't care. Whatever case may be. All right. So after the semester's over, he goes back on campus to go get some gym shoes he might have left in his locker, and he came in contact with a woman that he didn't know that was in his class. Right. So the woman says, "Hey, how you doing?" He says, "Hey, how you doing?" He didn't recognize her because this was, and mind you, he was the only guy in the class out of a class of 25 to 30. All right. So keep that in your mind too. All right. Okay. So she says, "Hey, how you doing?" He's like, "Hey, how you doing?" She's like, "Yeah, so that was a pretty dope class for him." He's like, "Yeah, whatever. I got an A minus, So he says, "What did you get?" She says, "Well, now, mind you, he got an A minus as his grade too." So therefore, she didn't take into account that he was participating. She didn't take into account that he attended every class. That didn't help him. He got the A minus in the whole class, Professor. All right. Okay. So the young lady says, "I got an A." So he like, okay. Now he's a little more interested. Okay. He like, okay, what's up? She said, "Oh yeah, you know what? The last 6 weeks of the semester, I wasn't present because I was pregnant." So he said, hold up. You mean to tell me that you missed the last 6 weeks of your class, of the class, and you still received the A? How's that possible? How's that possible? So my question to you is, of course, we know grading is subjective. And I tell my students, I'm actually a counselor in the City University of New York. All right. So I'm actually the guy that students come to when they have that gripe. I'm the one that kind of, I counsel. That's what I do. So, and I tell them, please don't glorify these grades. And I wanted to get your take on that too. Don't glorify these grades. I give them an example. I say, okay, let's say you write one paper, right? And let's just say you have 2 professors. One professor says, this is a phenomenal paper. It gets an A. Other professor says, it's a C. Who's right? And, they look at me dumbfounded. And I say, neither one of them are right. You right. Because you put your blood, sweat, and tears in this paper. You understand? So glorifying the 4.0 as opposed to the 2.9 is kind of silly. So I want your take on what do you take into account when you're grading these papers? Because like I said, you have an opinion like everyone else has. And have you ever had a student that kind of confronted your your expertise as a grader?
Okay. Yeah, I certainly have. I mean, that comes with that's a part of the course, that comes a part of the territory, is part of it. So I would say this, like you stated earlier, grading is subjective. Yeah. And to be honest, I wish it would be a way that we could really look at merit and sort of not only merit, but professional growth. And that should be a marker. So the way I would like to do it is like a sort of portfolio style where, you see the student work at the beginning of the semester and let's see the evolution of the work at the end. And then that determines, how well it is because, I think that is what we should try to promote is growth. So I say all this to say this. To be honest, 90% of what students will learn is BS, is academic posture.
Thank you.
It's
totally agree.
Yeah, it's kind of like it just reminds me of like what Bruce Lee would say, like all of these different styles and all of that. It's really trash. At the end of the day, it's really trying to find truth. So I tell my students 90% of what you learn in academia would be academic posturing, how to act, how to perform.
Right.
The other 10% is truth. And so it's like, what are you going to do with the knowledge that you have attained to fully express who you are? And that's really what it is. It's some people with PhDs that still are not fully expressing who they are. They're afraid to be themselves.
That's right.
They're afraid to own themselves.
That's right.
I mean, even when Socrates was talking about know thyself, they poisoned him. I mean, so when you think about it, so when you think about it, it's that sort of thing. So I would say when I'm critiquing students, for the most part, I kind of grade when it comes to paper on 4 different categories. The first category is thesis. And I tell students all the time, the thesis is your contract. You have to think of it as if you are going to a courtroom. This is your statement. This is like people in the street say, your word is bond right here. You have to hold on to it. It's important because in real life, you have to stand on something and have conviction.
That's
so
right.
I look at that. Next, I look at description. And that is what evidence are you bringing to the table that's going to support? So in other words, or, do you have the ham with the burger? In other words, if you making a statement or you standing behind that. So that's 2. Number 3 is so important, just as important to thesis, is analysis. Some people quote you to death, but if you're not breaking down that information in such a way that people can understand, like, what is the point of using highbrow language if no one understands you?
What you're saying.
My philosophy as a professor is to use the Jesus method of teaching. In other words, like you stated, was I need to break down complex thoughts into ideas into parables. So that everyone can pick it up. I look at that. And then last but not least, then this is what I put the least amount in. And it's funny because some people look at me, you're an English professor and you put the least amount. I put the least amount into the grammatical and that sort of thing to a certain extent, because really that's the cosmetic.
That's right.
If you speak with conviction, if you can back up what you're saying, and if you can break it down in such a way, then the grammar and most of those other things would take care of themselves.
That's right.
So what I'm looking for when I grade is, can you clearly communicate? Because really all English is communicating.
Yeah.
And if you can't clearly communicate, then forget my class.
You're gonna have a problem.
You're gonna make it through life. Like, what are you gonna do when you go to the courtroom? What are you gonna do when the police pull you over? What are you gonna do when you have an argument with your family? You have to be able to speak with conviction, back up what you say, and break down everything so that people can clearly understand. They don't have to agree, but they must clearly understand what you're saying. So that's how I try to do it. So, and I still have students that, I deserved a C. I was like, my guy, you're not clear. You're not clear. and I don't care, but I'll tell you, here's one thing that I tell my students all the time.
Sure. And
I tell them this, like, if they ever confront me about a grade, my policy is this. Okay, you want to confront me about your grade, cool. What I want from you is a 1-page paper, single space, telling me, defending why you should get a higher grade. Now, keep in mind that I will go ahead and read it, and then I'll grade it. But my policy is this: if you are right, you'll get a higher grade. But if I have to reread and I found more stuff that I did not find before, that's a problem. Then it's going down. So
it's going down.
So take your. So let's play the game. So I'm like the
Right.
little jigsaw on the saw. I'm like,